education. I'd like to hear your comment about, on the topic of education, some of the presidential candidates discussed it a little bit on the debate the other night, but having civics education be part of the high school curriculum, which I think, I've been out of that area for quite a while. I was a teacher at one time, but there's really no strong civics education. And following up on that, there's a little bit of interest in having a public service requirement. I grew up in a time when we expected to either go to the service or do some kind of help activity that would be good for the country. And I just think that whole area is lacking when kids graduate from college or high school year one to do something for the country.
Well, in regard to the latter point you made, I don't think right now I could be voting for requiring public service. I would sure encourage public service, and I have an intern program in my office where if college kids want to come to Washington, D.C. and work for practically nothing for a semester and learn about government, learn real work, and then about 2/3 of my staff used to be interns in my office. In fact, she came to my office 13 years ago to be an intern, and she's still with me. I suppose that shocks a lot of people. Anyway, but I think it gets into the area of involuntary servitude, and I think the public service you'd be talking about would be go back to the time of the draft and really military service.
Well, that would be one option. That would be one option.
Yeah.
But back to the first point I was trying to make, more the city's
Yeah.
requirement of high school graduation.
Okay.
There's not much understanding of how government works.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, I agree with you, and I have a voting record in regard to that on civics. And this is something that I just got done saying to you, the federal government shouldn't set curriculum. And this isn't setting curriculum, but it is the federal government taking a position that we ought to have more education on basic civics. Or another way of saying it would be on the Constitution, on how our government works, how the citizen fits in with the government working. Just like I tell you, representative government's a two-way street. I'm one half of it, you guys are all the other half of it. And you gotta have dialogue, things like that. I think it's basic process of government, seems to me. Now, there might be, the word civics may include more than that, but Senator Alexander was a member of the Senate for 18 years from Tennessee. And about 2014, 15, and 16, he promoted this real heavy. And I think it was in the, not in the way of a law, but a binding resolution that the power of the federal government, I suppose through the Department of Education, ought to encourage, not demand, but encourage civic education. Yes. And then when Senator Byrd, who's been dead now about 15 years, I believe, but he was a great proponent of what you're talking about, and he set up September the 17th, you know, you and I just talked about, that's our birthday. That's also Constitution Day. So Senator Byrd promoted doing something special on Constitution Day. So Congress goes through some people might call it show, but it's to bring emphasis to the fact that the Constitution is something very unique in the whole 6,000 history of humankind. I mean, we're a very exceptional country. Trouble is, we live here. We don't. If you get immigrants that come here from countries that have dictatorships, then we find out how much we don't appreciate the United States of America. If you talk to them. See? So anyway, I agree with what you said. Next.
We have seen an alarming number of nursing homes shutting down. They can't make their ends meet. They can't pay the bills, so to speak. the times, the reason given is these Medicaid reimbursement rates. They just, you know, federal health insurance programs have gotten in the way of conducting good business. It spills over into challenges with employee retention because they can't pay their employees what they're really worth. Excuse me for my voice here, so I'm getting it fixed next week. So, anyway, my question for you, sir, is what do you know of that's being done in Washington to address this issue? Because we see it here firsthand. You know, these people are our neighbors. My mother's in a nursing home, and their staff have told me that they have staffing challenges, and a lot of it is because of this. There's more to it than that, of course, but this is one of the key reasons. What do you know that's going on in Washington to address that, please?
Yeah. What's going on in Washington to address it is the way that we fund Medicaid, and it's pretty simple. So this is like I'm pushing you off to your state legislator. So hear me out before you say, don't do that to me. Is there any state legislators in here? Sometimes they come to my meetings. Donna, you were a former legislator. If I'm wrong on this, you tell me. So I've answered this question for nursing home managers for maybe a couple decades now. So I'm giving you the same answer I've given for a couple decades. The Medicaid is a federal state program. There's a few federal requirements, nothing to deal with the amount of money a state gets. But most, I don't know whether it's 80% or 90% of what goes on in state Medicaid programs is decided by the state and the state legislatures, or however they might do in the individual states. So I say to the nursing home manager, you want more money, go to your state legislatures, have them pay you more, and then the way the federal government helps, I hate to say this to you taxpayers, but we kind of got an open checking account when it comes to Medicaid. And so it varies from state to state, but in Iowa, it's usually somewhere between 59 and 63%. And so the state legislature spends an extra $1 on nursing homes. We kick in, let's say, 63 cents of that. So all you got to do is get the legislature to spend more money on nursing homes, and we'll pick up our share of it. Is that what you remember, Donna? You do? Okay. So if you do me a favor, if you discuss this with your state legislature and they tell you something different, let me know what they tell you, because I don't want to give you misleading information. Okay, next question.
But really the biggest one today they wanted to talk with you about is going back to farming, the estate tax, and looking at making sure we are securing that and making sure that the government doesn't come in and, you know, my grandparents are not great, they're 97 and 94 years old, still live on the farm, and we want to be able to pass it on to the next generations.
Okay. Before I answer her question, because it deals with the 2017 tax bill, and I'm going to use the word sunset. At the end of 2025, it sunsets. And if we don't do something between now and December 31st, 2025, you're going to have the biggest tax increase in the history of the country. And so what that would mean to the estate tax, instead of being about 12 or 13 $1 million, it's going to go back down to about $5.5 million, because that's the way it was before 2017. Because all these laws go back. Now let me, it's kind of stupid. You would be thinking in your mind, and rightly so, how come we sunsetted at 2025? Well, the rules of the Senate say on a tax bill, you can't pass a tax bill for more than 10 years unless you got at least 60 votes to pass it. That's the way that the budget law gets around the 60 vote requirement that you gotta have to shut off debate. So that's why it sunsets December 31st. So I'm going to be an advocate. I am right now. But I think the presidential election and the congressional election next year is going to determine whether or not we have this big tax increase, or we just hopefully make it permanent law. But if we don't have 60 votes to make it permanent law, then it can't be extended to more than 2035.